welcome to a special program of World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, the Belt and Road Forum is underway in Beijing. We are speaking to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his take on the initiative. And Emmanuel Macron is sworn in as the French president. Can he deliver on his promises of reforms and political healing in France? We start today's show with Beijing's biggest global event in May, the Belt and Road Forum. From a mostly recipient of ideas and practices to an economic powerhouse and a contributor to the world's change, historical changes have reshaped contemporary China over the past decades. One of the cornerstones of these changes is the Belt and Road Initiative, a 4-year-old project that is already shaping, some say, the international agenda with an exciting beginning over the weekend.
Welcome to Beijing. 4 years after the Belt and Road Initiative was proposed, over 1,500 representatives from around the world, including leaders of major nations, have gathered in the Chinese capital for a global forum. The enthusiasm from so many partners bodes well for a good start, which, according to the proverb, is halfway to success. Chinese President Xi Jinping says the future of the Belt and Road Initiative can be even more inclusive.
The Belt and Road Initiative is deeply rooted in the historical soil of the ancient Silk Road. While mainly focusing on the Eurasian and African continents, it is open to everyone. It's based on all countries' consultation, and its fruit will be shared by all.
The 2-day event will review progress on developing the initiative, reach consensus on more cooperation, with a focus on the structural readjustment of China's economy, and help shore up the global economy. For UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the initiative ushers in new hope.
The Belt and Road Initiative has immense potential. Running through Asia, Europe and Africa, and extended to the whole world, it is far-reaching in geography and in ambition.
More than 2,000 years ago, the ancient Silk Road played a significant role in forging economic and cultural ties between China and other nations. Greater connectivity brought greater diversity of goods from different civilizations. In the 21st century, when the world is facing new challenges, the Belt and Road Initiative is expected to take that spirit of trade and cooperation to new heights. Or, as some suggest, China's opening up policy 2.0 is taking win-win cooperation beyond its borders.
And that spirit is highly appreciated by Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, who came to Beijing for the Belt and Road Forum over the weekend. In his first ever one-on-one interview in China since serving in his current position, the Secretary General, well known for his straight-talk style, told CGTN that the world needs to act and not just talk about the Belt and Road Initiative. The success of concrete projects, he said, reduces doubts and raises the determination to make a difference. Secretary General, welcome to CGTN. Earlier, at the opening speech of the BRI Forum, Chinese President Xi Jinping had been talking about the new plans for Belt and Road Initiative. You later, in your speech, talk about seizing that momentum. Can we?
Yes, of course. I think that today China has a leading role in promoting multilateralism in the world. China has a vision that globalization is a good thing that needs to be promoted, even if there are aspects that can be corrected, can be improved. Some people are left behind. But the Chinese approach is that we need better globalization, and we need, with the Belt and Road Initiative, to create the conditions for larger areas of the world to benefit in order exactly for globalization to be an opportunity for all, for nobody to be left behind, as we also are committed to through the Agenda 2030, that was approved by the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Yeah.
So I think this morning's speech is the confirmation of what has been the very clear commitment of China to a fair globalization, to fair and free trade, and to a multilateral governance able to respond to the global challenges we have today.
Well, this is a window opportunity, many say, but the question is whether we are going to catch this window opportunity. For example, Secretary General, you talk about the common ground between BRI and SDG by 2030. Of course, that's the United Nations set up. Chinese President Xi Jinping was also among many state leaders there to sign up on it. But what about the action plans? We need to take action, don't we?
Of course, but the advantage of the Belt and Road Initiative is that it's not only a concept, it is a combination of a number of concrete projects that are being implemented in many areas of the world.
What to you are the most important projects?
Well, those that relate to infrastructure that can connect, but also those that relate to the peoples-to-peoples connection. Because we live in a world where there are too many conflicts. We live in a world where there are too many misunderstandings between different religions, different cultures. So this is not only a material development project, this is a project to bring people together. This is not something only for development, it's also for peace. And this is the great value of this initiative, and this is why it is so much linked to the agendas of the United Nations that are for sustainable development and for sustaining peace.
Okay, so China has already got its action plan, for example, with BRI platform that everybody join in. But what about the others? When you talk about SDG to be achieved by 2030, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of work has to be done day by day.
The leadership must be of member states. Member states must assume the sustainable development goals in relation to education, to health, to jobs, to the build-up of institutions.
Is it happening with all of these
poverty.
political changes recently, Mr. Secretary General?
In all these aspects, member states need to make sure that they include the very ambitious objectives that the General Assembly of the United Nations approved, with President Xi present. Member states must be able to include them in their budgets, in their plans, in their strategies. And the advantage of projects like the Belt and Road is that they fit exactly in those projects because they create the conditions for development to be sustainable and for development to be inclusive. Because sometimes you can have a huge increase of an economy, but with many becoming richer and richer and many becoming poorer and poorer. And this is exactly the kind of development we do not want.
Are you seeing member states are really doing that, majority of them?
I think there are many member states that are already doing them. There is still a long way to go. And there is still a lot in organizations like the United Nations, the World Bank, the IMF, the other international financial institutions like the new Asian Infrastructure Bank that was launched by China. There's a lot that everybody can do to support member states, but the leadership is very important. The leadership must be of the member states.
But there are many political changes going on since right before and after you come into the office as Secretary General. So what would that mean for this implementation?
We engage with all of them to make them understand that the world is now small, that we need to be able to live together, to respect each other, and namely in relation to climate change. That's probably the most divisive aspect that is now very much in the media. In relation to climate change, this is a threat to the future of mankind, and we need to make sure that what was agreed in Paris is fully implemented.
But
and
they
again, this is an area where I count a lot on China's leadership.
But they say, well, we have other priorities.
No, but you know, even when governments are reluctant, we see now that green business is good business. Those countries, those companies that are investing in the green economy are the ones that in the future will be more profitable because they will be more advanced technologically with better capacity to face the challenges of the future. So even when governments are reluctant, the business community, the cities, the regions, the societies, I'm very confident they will do everything to make sure that we will be able to to tame climate change, we will be able to create the conditions for the world to be spared to a tragedy that our grandchildren would not deserve.
The longer vision, that's what we're talking about here. Could BRI, by the way, since we're sitting here at the BRI forum, could that help with that longer vision?
That is what we are missing in today's world, strategic vision, long-term vision. You know, many political systems are such that people live in such a frantic cycle in which everybody is looking at the polls every day and decisions are thinking about the next week or the next elections. We need more and more strategic visions. We need more and more to understand that our problems can only be solved in a long-term perspective. And that has a lot to do with the Chinese tradition. I think the Chinese tradition, probably coming from Confucius, has always allowed for a wiser approach to problems instead of the very excited attempt to solve everything at the same time and in the end not being able to solve anything at all.
China is a developing country.
But it is also becoming a developed country, and in many aspects is more developed than most of the other countries.
And yet anew in that area, and therefore this is an interesting match we're talking about, that UN with decades of experiences and hands-on knowledge, and China providing together with others some of the funding to be able to make things come true. Nobody has ever tested that before, at least with developing countries. So, Mr. Secretary General, I guess that's one of the most exciting experiments we ever have.
It's a perfect marriage, but it's not only...
Is that how you describe it?
It's not only knowledge in the UN and funding in China. There is a lot of knowledge in China, and this knowledge is very important also for us. Not that we are going to copy the Chinese model, because China has specific conditions for its development, but we can learn the lessons of the Chinese development in order to avoid mistakes in other parts of the world, and we can use the capacities that were developed in China in technology, in strategies to fight poverty, in all areas today of industrial and services development, in order to help other countries be able to, I would say, to have a quantum leap, to have a jump.
I love that word.
Not to have to go all the way, but to be able to take profit of the Chinese experience to jump into a higher level of development.
This is interesting, the quantum jump, but at the same time, step by step. How is that match going to be like?
Well, we need to go step by step to prepare the quantum leap.
Good way of saying it, Secretary General. Even if about the Belt and Road Initiative, people are still having this Cold War mentality, you know, suggesting, well, this is China expanding geopolitically, this and that. What is your judgment of the nature of this and China's incentive to do it?
China is today a global economic powerhouse, and there is a mutual benefit on this. I mean, if China will help a country develop its economy, China will also benefit. It's a mutual benefit. It's a win-win situation. And so obviously we can see all these projects as a way also to promote Chinese investment, Chinese trade, Chinese wealth. It is true, but that's exactly the win-win situation. You try to make others rich and also become richer doing that. If everybody would behave in the same way, the world would be much better.
Well, Mr. Secretary General, we talk about grand schemes like the Sustainable Development Goals and the Belt and Road Initiative, but people talk about early harvest and lower hanging fruit. You have to give people confidence that it's moving in the right direction. What are the factors, Mr. Secretary General, you would look at in order to make that judgment?
Well, we had an example this afternoon in the debate. The simple implementation of the new rules in relation to the facilitation of trade will reduce by 14.3% the costs of trade. So there are simple things that we can do that do not require a lot of investment. They just require good policies, good norms, good rules. This is the software of the economy in which we can very quickly achieve high results. If you build a harbor, it will take time. But of course the harbor will then be essential to promote trade, to guarantee wealth, guarantee growth. But there are many small things we can do, just improving policies, just making sure that we are more fair in the way we act. There are many things, simplifying rules, many things we can do that will have an immediate impact in the lives of people with a very low cost.
Mr. Secretary General, this is your first exclusive TV interview when you are in China. And certainly a lot of people are watching very closely, both inside this country and beyond. They want to hear from you. Where do you think the world should be going with your sitting in the office as Secretary General?
Well, the world is not going because I'm sitting in the office of Secretary General. What is important today, more important than anything else, is to people to be able to overcome their contradictions, to respect each other, and to work together for peace. China is doing all these efforts.
You and President Xi are communicating about that.
We should be. China is doing all these efforts with the Belt and Road Initiative. Imagine if the countries where these investments are being made will enter into a conflict, the investment will be lost. So peace is a basic condition for development. And peace is something that we need to put as our first priority in everything we do, and all countries should have it in their first priorities. They say in the village of my grandparents, and my grandfather was very keen on telling me this: it is better a bad agreement than a good war.
How smart their generation is. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary General, for being with us. Thank you for joining us on CGTN.
It's a pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're watching a special program, A World Inside with Tian Wei on CGTN. France has just sworn in a new president. Emmanuel Macron took over from Francois Hollande at the Elysee Palace. The 39-year-old centrist defeated the far-right Marine Le Pen in last week's runoff, becoming the youngest ever French leader since Napoleon. The pro-European former investment banker has campaigned to shake up the country's political order, to reinvigorate its economy, and to strengthen France's place as a central pillar of the European Union. Let's take a look at his inauguration today and see whether he can really cash out all his promises.
A new French president signed, sealed, and delivered. Emmanuel Macron was sworn in as the new president of France on Sunday. In his inaugural address, he said he would seek to build a strong France that was sure of itself and the world.
The French people would embrace the future, collectively soar, reaffirm their faith in the values that made them a great people.
In 2014, Francois Hollande appointed Mr. Macron as the Minister of Economy. France's economy has had zero growth for 3 years. Macron was pro-business. He tried convincing American as well as EU scientists, academics and entrepreneurs to move to France. One of his biggest accomplishments was what's known as the Macron Law. It steered the government towards more business-friendly policies. He said it would target 60 billion euros in savings over 5 years and cut up to 120,000 civil service jobs. He also promised to re-inject 50 billion euros into the Eurozone's second-largest economy. Cut in corporate tax rates to 25% from 33% would be phased in gradually. Under his plan, France would keep the budget deficit below the EU-required threshold of 3% of gross domestic product. Macron estimates the target will be met this year. Macron campaigned on a pro-EU platform.
The Europe we need will be reformed and relaunched because it protects us and it allows us to carry our values into the world.
True to his promise, Mr. Macron's first stop as president is Chancellor Angela Merkel. He's expected to meet her next week and urge the German leader to strengthen EU anti-dumping measures, tighten control of foreign investments in strategic sectors. Whether they will reach consensus on other matters remains to be seen.
So what does the inauguration of Emmanuel Macron as the new French president mean for France and the rest of the world? Let's turn to our panel. Join me in the Beijing studio, Mr. Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department for European Studies with China Institute of International Studies, join us in Paris, France. We are having political commentator Anna Elizabeth Mue, who is a columnist at The Telegraph, The Weekly Standard, and The Sun. Welcome to both of you. Ms. Mue, may I start with you? How much will the new president now, make a difference at all?
He has to make a difference because he's aware that the country has lost crucial time during the 5 years of the Hollande presidency. He knows that we have increased the national debt by 300 billion euros in 5 years, and we have 1 million more unemployed when we had 5 years ago, and therefore the situation, which was difficult to begin with at the time of the financial crisis, is now catastrophic. He has said that he would take stringent measures to liberalize the labor market so that would create more jobs and make the country more attractive. But his first job literally now is going to think up a budget in order to make cuts so that the country can slowly start going back to a viable economic situation.
I see. Mr. Cui, though, we all understand Mr. Macron, with his new party, he has to find his allies in order to, first of all, form a government, and secondly, to make everything he has in mind to be passed in the Congress. But that's not easy. So, really, what he's thinking and what could he do?
Yes, I think that because as we know, according to his campaign platform, President Macron regarded himself as a centrist, which means that he will try to do something different from the past, from the traditional parties. But another question, yes, just like you mentioned, that firstly, how could President Macron to try to reorganize the politicals in France, and then how to deal with this test in forthcoming legislative election, especially for his new party. And then how could he get a cooperative government in France to do something more, reform it?
He really, as the new president, and the president who is still pro-Europe, which is going against the rise of nationalism and deglobalization, needs to have some early harvest in his administration, I guess, for people to be convinced that he is the one for the job. So, Ms. Mue, despite of the young age, really, Mr. Macron has to prove himself. What could be the thing that can immediately help him to prove himself in front of the public in France?
To some extent, the age is seen here as a positive, because we've had a succession of old men, and we've had a succession of people who looked incredibly like the person who had come before. So the age in itself is actually helping, because he says, I am different. I have led this incredible campaign. You didn't know me 2 years ago, and now I'm president of France. And I would like, now is the time for all of us to do something exceptional, and it can be done. So what he's doing, it may be long on communication and short on fact, but it is something that is a bit like the message of hope of somebody like Obama or Justin Trudeau. It's saying, this is a new generation, we have to do things differently. And you need political credit, you need public approval in order to take any reform. The only reforms that he's got to take are going to be painful. So he really needs to have all this communication thing so that people will accept them in a combination of, yes, we trust him, and yes, we are capable of undergoing some amount of pain, as long as he can show us that it is done in a just way, not just for one part of the population.
Yeah, but Ms. Mue, you talk about two case studies. President Obama, the former president of the United States, and now also the Prime Minister of Canada. You see very different case studies because of national conditions and also international circumstances. One seemed to still manage very well at this point in Canada, and yet President Obama, some say he is a lame duck president, even though he doesn't like that title. So what about Mr. Macron? His fate, I think that is an interesting comparison we can do over here. Ms. Mue, very briefly from you.
One of the things I would say is that he is lucky in that the economy, the world economy is on the upturn. It took quite a bit of time for the financial crisis of 2008 to be digested by the economy, but right now we see growth everywhere else. Now that helps tremendously because that means that people will want to buy stuff from France, and which is also why he's got a number of economic and policy decisions to take in France. But he also must coordinate this with Europe, and especially with Germany, because the last thing France needs right now is for the euro to go up, and this is exactly what it's doing. The dollar is going down, the pound is of course going down because of Brexit. If the euro goes up, we cannot sell whatever it is that we produce, and we produce a number of goods. But that would actually be incredibly unhelpful for France.
Okay.
But the Germans like it, would like it. That's his big first hurdle, I would say.
Yeah. Mr. Cui, Ms. Mue talked about two very important points. One is some of the economic policy agendas he had during his campaign. Some of them, for example, buy European. The other thing is France's relationship with Germany, which has been quite going up and downs over the decades. So, Mr. Cui, with your perspective, what do you think about that two possibilities, economically and also German-France relations?
Yes, President Macron regarded as pro-European politicians, and it's also very, very remarkable political claims of him. But now, of course, as we understand, certainly according to President Macron's claims that the economic development of France will be relied on the European development. And also, as we know, especially after the Brexit, and it shows that France needed to take a more, leading role, especially compared with recent years. This, the up of Germany. But of course, now the question is, I think that no matter which kind of propose or policy by Mr. Macron, firstly, he needed to deal with domestic challenges, especially economically, and then of course at the same time, so-called buy European. I hope that it's just, campaign words.
Okay.
And I don't think that the protection, any kind of protectionism in European Union or in France will be the way out of the difficult situation at this moment.
Ms. Mue, we only have 30 seconds left for you. Yes, the two leaders are going to meet, France, Germany, that's going to be something. So is there some specific barometer we should look at as a result of that meeting? What would be the one that would prove it's successful or it's not? Ms. Mue, final words.
To some extent, it's going to be how Angela Merkel reacts to this visit. You have to remember that they know one another, that he was the Minister for the Economy, that he saw her also during the campaign, so probably he already told her what he was expecting from Germany. But by and large, the problem is that France has not abided by European rules in terms of keeping the budget deficit at 3% of GDP. And so what he needs to make her believe is that, yes, he can bring it back to 3% of GDP for 2018, and that's not so easy because since practically the Maastricht Treaty, we never, ever delivered on that promise.
And
we were also sloppy.
We are running out of time, Cui Hongjian as well. Thank you so much. Running out of time for our program. Thank you so much. That is the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, try to find us World Inside CGTN in your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. Also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Inside with Tian Wei team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights from across China and around the world. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody.